mula medik para menilai sebab mas angkri arul ang yang terus tak lagi jadi terlihat telah eberaklan arah mulut menilai sebab itu ang lagi mulai menuju tahu dia kalau serahin masih jadi perlu الأرض مثلا من تقبل صوب المي اللي هي غسل طايرة بابيكيل ماليا بيبيلا طول بطول إلى طول مدينة ده يا مالو بنت بس الخرام أموات تجيب التايم إذا سجى يجيب طول السيدة كلها ودس بيد ودس سوري أتقل سنة أقول أبو أمور يديك سلطان كيكال تادة اللي تم نارا مريجل مي نامي كلا تمولد تادة Agote Sultana Jerry Bush, kaya ora profesor na Southern Illinois University untuk tilang mga school ng mga certificate legal research. Maria Sarah Hobbs, Maria Jenna Ord, Maria Julia Wendelman, yung mga nakakalaman. And then after aman mo total sa alin doon May tinatigil na start tara Pacific Health Emergency Initiative at yung mga was even before we ran 911 tinang level may also sa krigit ingilong 30 na mali mahiling kamera niya Marta Colomda sura todo el alto está el quiere te ir todo el bodo sandri este amraría un número American Samoa en área rada el invite tira CDC mera American Samoa la last meeting la pivo esto no sandra todo entre la foro journalism todo marabo ba hacia así el ultra hice la todo malu mentalidad na morir en mi amigo hace na toda monotra climate malu tiang tora yang atau mayor te gidi am ne balance metadu ya per orang no modo tiga gidi adra CDC mengaji dan cherry bus yang berbuat gidi tua maknanya was tiang meralia ada nanti project happen mo project terakhir lagi yo mesagil termelela climate dan mahal hindi mo dasong amal tora environment mabuder kalau na sulit tiga robot ada environment Isra kung dasot yan to in acknowledge na silmaya los ngel malumeng sel ngared malumeng ngoyal maluway kiftal rol ng maramay malmo ama Masaygi del waya los ngel malumeng ngared loldiul mara abdul adul wasi agimla mo mes los na buto ka typhoon ng mengalak kadang tara ada belau lendira al 20 kita mingil wasi every week Maria typhoon yang mengalak betul lah Olympic mengalak typhoon. Kerana tu mungkin wasi orang awam orang buat saya aku terkeluar hindi kita lagi dengan bela elang tinggi belum. Kerana tu mungkin wasi ada gil rak tadi nak sal betul orang ramu elang mana belum lagi belau lengkla lengkla atau luar beran mabi boy kan mana belum. Kerana kemudian wasing diosnya terak mengargi marah romil kaya makardi ngatnya masuk sulo. Itu dia kalau dia mesra pergi asal berarti wasing. Kita waktu kita tirar rumah menteri kemudian sangat malunya lah. Dia kalau mesra arole lamsei, kami ambil wasing betul orang ini tujuh, amnat muada bertoman, namun dia kemudian asal dari mangang aja. Maluway sa gidi selora la kadrubu ma klawar ma igerak tela heart masukan ma high blood ma elora la kale mo sa gidi mo amara e gila dia dasal mo dai di segment terror na mo amara ya marania mo mesa gel keka ngania te el te gidi toy el tang erun terror la la pon la kanu el overall gile el bongem taas abdul beno Hindi na kung saan diyo mesra sel bandera na imana rabela tial bui pan la mo sabi makaradi la mesra bui la say sabi kung matmura mo ngal kire la namo de atsuwe le bui lam namo suel be nya del plato namo de alwa yang aramo le tuyo klo habui le kan ngil wasama ngaki tiga rai mung abul mesa ke yide o mesel wasi maloi se yide ya umrole lagi marole lagi namo start to change le klendele lada bamran mongod e dilah bolo mu rabalu le mutko el maran mut mura atsela bulu el mo efekta agar masim ra abulwa maktire kolgora amsad lo segi de unar mu lo mes tikar adan martiam el wase bagai seu e do tisel sasi madwesel wayal ngred el marabul adal wasabe bi regagi to hadi al mama indisel noral el kiram lo meseu el musul el alterol Michael Milter akmal di ngaralet atal naman na de atal nalet hindi gilet hindi gid mansur kasi ang das ang pot flow to gila de ato dingi ngare be bira blura papa no ginin na modibus ako magiging was at kinibas president rin ramla declare was at sila government lo mora atal mora kil bol nem namo dia ka bulu magiging was kita atal belau adriapo the feeler say na karon kira tergib ng arba bulu hindi gen bulu sa southwest ma wak ayon at man ngani atele taratay me kadmo sa tarapsu enseguida todo el soga umundas en el tutao era el tal sunday e bonito lo sebo de todo el certiga y del salida del ley por la igel se asilo oti seguir la data marabul adul wasi hindi altan malam hindi ngari atele kamam ki el population sa baham mo mad kina la tul la upload el tilimar lo tora bard. So welcome everyone. And I say this in English, it's a little bit more, probably more succinct. In thinking about the story that must be told on the face and the voices of the Palauans and health effect of climate change, one cannot but spend some time dealing with the Palauan word, use or dixet. Our mana, our sacred gift, our divine inheritance. What would become of us when it is violated? The faces and the voices could in time succumb to the effect of the climate change, such as extreme and strange weather conditions, sea level change, and change in the tide schedule, emergence of infectious disease and social anxiety, and threat of violating our food source, and ultimately exacerbating our rates of NCDs, or non-communicable disease that will ultimately bring about significant ethnomorbidity, ethnomortality, and in some respect, ethnocide. This is not being melodramatic, but if you look at our data, how can you conclude otherwise? Even our flag with the moon renders itself obsolete, because the sea level rise and the moon has become an unpredictable sign of tide and fish migration and some instance spawning, let alone the behavior of our fauna and our marine biodiversity. Therefore, I'm excited about the possibilities and the potential of this project so that the stories be told that the effects of climate change are not of our own, but the adaptation is clearly our own. And we must thank our friends who are here to assist us to tell that story. So I thank you all for coming and wish that the story unfold. For us who are involved here today, I hope that we morph with it. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you for the warm welcome we've received over the last couple of days here. Everybody's been very generous, very kind. And hopefully at the end of this project we will have a couple of products that will be useful for you. And that's what I'm going to explain this morning. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Jerry Bush. I am a teacher at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois. I'm teaching the communications department where I teach advertising classes, media media classes. And with me on this trip, we have 3 students. Sarah Hubbs, who is a communications student at Southern Illinois. Julia Rendelman, who is a photojournalism student, a grad student at Southern Illinois. And Jenna Ord, who is a undergrad photojournalism student at Southern Illinois. Our project focus here is to gather information, gather data on public health aspects of climate change. So we'll be taking lots of photographs, doing some interviews, gathering all the data we can possibly gather in the short time that we're here. And what I want to talk a little bit about is the phases of the project and the products that we will have for you in however much time it takes to complete them. The first step, and probably the most important step to us, is we will have a book at the end of this project. And I have some samples of books that we've done in the past that you're all welcome to come to the table and look at. But they're prior photojournalism books that we've done on some, of course, more local projects. This is as far as we've ever been away from home to do one of these projects. But I have one called the Caro Project, which is a city close to where we live, and one on a major forest that's close to where we live called the Shawnee Forest. And they're filled with beautiful photographs and editorial to go along with the photographs to explain. So that's our main purpose, is to complete and gather information for one of these books. The second step, we will be doing I have a class that I'm teaching, advertising campaigns. It's all seniors in journalism. And they're back home right now writing a situation analysis for that project. That project will be completed around December. We will be presenting that information. So that will be the first step completed. We will also be doing a website that will contain all the information that we gather, including photographs, interviews, stories that you've told us over our time here. All the data that we gather will also be available online for everybody all over the world to see. So basically, that's the story, a three-part project. Quite extensive, quite a lot of data to gather in the short time we have here. I wish we had longer to spend in our beautiful country. Hopefully we'll get to come back sometime soon. So with that, I will turn it over to Molly.
And some of you know me from many years back, and so it's nice to see so many old friends here and many new ones. I have worked with a gentleman some of you I think know quite well, Dr. Mark Kime, who has been working in the Pacific and Palau for, as Dr. Kuartei said, prior to 9/11. And he could not make it here this morning. He's in Thailand, and he could not change this as much as he tried, and I promise you he tried very, very hard. He would rather be here today with all of you than where he is, so he sends his very best regards to all of you and his regrets as well for not being here this morning. I'm going to talk this morning, this is not a short presentation, but I will try to keep it as short as possible and relatively simple. But we want to talk a little bit about what we mean when we're talking about human health impact of climate change. There has been a good deal of very good work in the past and continues for climate change in the Pacific and in Palau. And some of the people doing this work are in the room today. And much of that work, maybe not all of it, is focused on the environment. You know, looking at the coral, how has the bleaching, maybe looking at the fish, looking at some of the changes in weather. What we are trying to look at is what does that mean for human health? What does that mean for all of you in this room and your families and your children and maybe even your grandchildren? So we are here to talk with all of you as much as we can, and to hear what you have to say, and your feelings and your thoughts, and maybe your observations about this. And then try to capture those observations and thoughts and put them into some kind of a book, a nice product that you can share with each other and with whoever else you'd like to share this with. All of the information in this book, all of the materials will be written in Palau, and then we will have some English in the book as well. And this will all be chosen, what's included in the book will be chosen and selected by you here in Palau. And so we are just the engine, but actually this is a product that we hope will be Palauan in spirit and not American in spirit. So, having said that, do you want to say anything?
Nga, halen lomo le katira lo liu ita. Di mo besul?
Okay, so we're going to talk again, like I said, the human health impact. So, just in general, what is climate change? And climate change really is any change over a long period of time.
I'll ask Dr. Kuartei to translate before I butcher the language.
So we're looking at what is climate change, and it's any change that we see over a period of time, not from 1 week to the next, but maybe over decades, a long period of time. And sometimes this is due to natural changes in the world. We understand the world has changed, weather has changed over hundreds of years, but it may also be due to changes that are due to change in human behavior that we've seen in the last several decades.
Masagil korawel talmalela yoltoma gob tel weather kita gil lomes tadi lomes rawaseng elalsis malben akal sante gil la moringira alsena tartara maluben kamar taltai me bebiringa gil waya dulu aseng loel bebinata motoni bebinata ringi la gil la marule da un.
A lot of science has come together looking at this, and there seems to be little doubt that the changes that we've seen most recently are due to humans and the amount of greenhouse gases, the amount of industry that we're producing recently.
Betul hangasem namod mag yang mungkin wasa bilay kaidin talmalela ayol tuma ben tabela bilwat aigil atula plulat el gitar ada umula atula kuma kaidin factory gel mula plan malubeng gel males malubeng korong.
And as I think most of you probably know, very little of this is due to activity in the Pacific region, but more due to activities in the highly industrialized countries such as the United States, China, Japan, and so forth.
Bebeni aya kekiranya talmalle le konrodi alsan markul talmalle ligel maklol batula blula lamin ngarabam ligel masina masyawan magel maklol blula.
So there's an organization that is sort of the premier scientific organization in the world, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but this Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has looked at 4 basic principles. They have 4 groups. They looked at the science behind climate change. They looked at what is vulnerability to climate change. They've taken a look at some of the efforts to mitigate or lessen those effects. And now there's another 4th working group which is looking at adaptation measures. And Dr. Mark Keim is on this 4th working group as well.
Marita gidel gora group para blula dan nul ladali ebrania eval tolo sa aboteng ay katol lo sa dan toy o ngerung ya sumral toy kada mo makrang ya o ngede kada makrang ya ruli dum kada mo sisi malboy nya igel el talmalen maralmen sebed ke مغاتسني إن جيدا مرقا ما ترتي جيدا أدلو جورد
90 to 99% sure. So they're not quite willing to say 100%, but 90 to 99% sure that this is due to human activity.
Magagita talmalela ayota matao sa ikidal group pagkala tinapulata o marang wasi motiv betiu basen telwasi gal telmalat mali telmalat kita ada terterula.
So I'm going to show you this very quickly. This is a look at some of the trends that we are seeing that we believe is due to climate change. So on the left, we have a list of, we expect to see fewer cold days, more hot days, more heat waves, so periods of time where it's hot for an extended period of time. Something we're very interested in as well, more heavy precipitation. More rain, lots of rain, which can result in flooding and landslides, which we see frequently in many of the islands in the Pacific. More areas affected by drought. Now this table is talking about worldwide, okay, as well. Intense cyclone activity increasing, and then as well increased incidence of the sea rising.
So no me saca aquí de ayer, al ser la plata y de ayer, mokla su o moringia su kodi menaman berja, moringia to mombasa ayer tu dulu asen man morgot del sils ayer morgot del mokto a sils en real, el mokto ayer hit web ayer man mori mis en real, man moringia adel man, direct no hay bebida basio que man mori mis en cloa ullerni, e bebida basio mo tip, moklo a tele la typhoon, tiga cyclone que do typhoon. Direct الموضوع الطيفون direct المومس عطاو بالمرة مرة بسير بالقادر المرة قادر.
So what concerns us here is the red is above 99%, so almost virtually certain, and that is that we'll see worldwide, we'll see fewer colder days and more hot days. So this is going to happen according to this expert panel.
بس لما مثلا تيجي هذا المد سل موال توصل وتيل باسنت وتيل 80% لأن تغيير وصل مرال مو قصاي جيد الملغول تنسيل سايكل ملغول تبري.
And then below that we see more heat waves and heavy rain, and even here the intensity of the storm activity and the sea level rise, which is one of the concerns for this region of the world.
Direct sebenarnya dalam masa kita berbeli lembang berbapa selbasen tering bergula saya remur terotim optim 80% dan ada sen malu terofun moise.
So what are we actually seeing, and what does this table mean? Well, we take a look first at what's happening, what we're observing in the oceans.
Ngat mo masa kita orang awal tuh mula adu berasal ada.
Now again, these are observations made worldwide, but these are particularly relevant to Palau and the Pacific Island. We're seeing a change in marine life. So the fish may be lower in number, or they may just be moving in different patterns than they used to, and maybe a little bit more difficult to locate them when fishing.
Igagil tol mokral sila bulan hindi kaya igagil koral tinekal sa elmo dober below sa domes en sabel mo mod atele la ataw mangi kala sabel mo masay malumen momgata ta kalibra ataw mangamis mo regel ti mo god ta mo bring la dosi.
Another thing that we're seeing is that we're seeing a warming of the temperature in the ocean, but particularly around the equator, such as where you are here. Whereas up in the poles at the top and the south, you're seeing the water getting a little cooler because of the ice that's melting into the ocean.
Hindi na domes na di klendelel man bengel hotel ata bet egel tan ngari man mongel ta di magal ta dobri egel ngara north man bet south sel ngara di lus ma dims rablulat egel kori am lamo lamet la toger mo di malgot ta ta egel di baso.
We're seeing sea level rise, so the ocean is just rising a little bit above where we used to see it many years ago. And here, I think that you are very aware of this. In many of the islands, you've experienced where the ocean has come in to places where it doesn't usually come, or maybe it comes in for a longer period of time. Some of this we know has come into, saltwater has come into taro patches perhaps, and ruined the taro patches for some period of time. Did I say something wrong? I'm glad. And the last one that you've seen here as well, I think, is where the ocean, the acid in the ocean is changing just a little, so that we're seeing the bleaching of the coral reefs and some of the formation of shellfish and so forth, which I think is extremely important here in this region. So I just want to say again and remind you, please keep in your minds while we're talking about these things, keep in mind how this will affect your families and your communities and the health of your families, rather than just how it looks out in the ocean. I'd like you to think a little bit about this, because this week we want to talk to you some about that. So what we can expect to see with weather in all of the Pacific are more severe cyclones and perhaps more widespread drought. And this is a photograph here of a drought that took place in the Marshalls. These are folks who live in Ibai, and they're here collecting some water at a distribution site. Again, in all of the Pacific, just briefly, because of more frequent El Nino, we expect to see more droughts in some parts of the Pacific Islands. We expect to see more frequent or intense typhoons. And you may, some of you, I don't know if you can all read this in the back, but you'll notice that Palau is not listed on any of these, so you're in a pretty good situation here. Palau is not actually in the sort of typhoon belt of the Pacific, but there seems to be some evidence that some of these storms may shift a little if the water gets warm enough, and if there are also more intense storms that are really hitting some other islands, some of that bad weather may reach far enough to affect you here in Palau.
So no mesen take el Niño malaban sa el Morawaya bol lo medir tabulat del area tangani e kita ke bebir avulul sebel mo Maria tip tanya Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Cook Island, American Samoa, Kiribati, FSM mare mai ya mo mesra el cyclones sel Boriora equator torgel was cyclones sel oberba torgel was typhoon la que mo mesra el Boria cyclones in Imal with typhoon sel south and Tuvalu, Samoa, Tonga, Cook Island, French Polynesia is a more tip that Tonga Masama. Kita ada bela waktu hibli mitri, ding multro kulmania dari bukan.
We talked again, this is a discussion of what we will see, we expect to see in the coastal systems, increased erosion and subsidence of the land. And it's expected that up to 30%, this is worldwide, that there will be a 30% loss of salt marshes, mangroves, and coral reefs. And that coastal flooding, again worldwide, is expected to affect millions of people as this climate change increases.
Sentosa said real moklo real mo mangas direkani hotel basen traigel ruam se agaki dele kaburs mamse direkan mo modibus kita mo mes basen moklo ba marar ari hotel bel kadra ya mo mes traigel bebir area ban mo tamal ra selang Pacific American Samoa Micronesia tel tangani ma Fiji ma Tuvalu.
And I think some of you may know Tuvalu, in fact, is being affected very, very seriously by this event already today. This is perhaps a worry for Palau sometimes in the distant future. Maybe you see a little bit of this happening now. But in Tuvalu and Kiribati, some other parts of the Pacific area, this is a serious problem today for the people who live there.
Baltanya da kau san mal Malaysia di over Tuvalu, Kiribati already gelbulu am lamangas tanamo sigal.
Cyclones with the storms coming in, and then the sea level rise, which can result in flooding, but again crop failure, or maybe even displacing the population, maybe even forcing people to move from where they've always lived with their families for hundreds of years. This is a photograph. Both of these were taken in Lucanor Island in Chuuk, Micronesia. I think it was about 2004. They had an event where there was no storm. The sea rose. It came into the taro patch for 1 hour and went back out. This taro patch and all the others on the island were killed and were affected by this. And it took several months for a group to come in and do an assessment and bring some help to these people. And they were at this point just pulling the rotted taro out of the ground and eating what they could, eating the leaves and eating the rotted taro. But that was really all the food that they had left. And they estimate that it was going to take quite a long time, maybe several years, for this area to be usable again because of the salt that had gotten into the soil.
Senaran mokla tim teng lo semua tongas assessment spending mo dia salwil mo gorola belum direkal bebera time bukan bebis until kor kaul mo monia mongkang kal utum direkal ni kai dal tora typhoon kita matengin was taba me mo te ida siasira ruk el tilo taba tim letal singa gitu ya lo bang ako mesay ka dia amray ka ada sila mga nilay ka kwante tele na prang la ibuk mang na kle mura man na maputay ka nise
Another important consideration as a result of these things, we can expect to see increased malnutrition, perhaps worldwide. It's now worse in some other parts of the world than others. And increased disaster deaths due to heat waves, floods, storms, fires. But again, we expect to see some increase in some of the cardiorespiratory or non-communicable diseases that exist in your community. They may be worsened by this, as well as some change perhaps in the distribution of infectious diseases with change in the disease vectors.
I think so. Yeah.
So sento meses seguida ir toy los otros was em kanta blue moria aga kidele bao ma le ngimui ma le moria plo atao ma bay ma ngao ma kaptim yang moria to sa de la heart ma le mol medet e dire que lo de aquí kidele gora waya o yu rafta de como moda hablar de ya para ir tigido se así Jika seguida belum nari jel praf dia terlalu berawal le tumno rat lagi terubah hari namo iyo boleh namo dia akan
So immediately, it's believed that the most vulnerable people in the world are those who live in small island developing states and other coastal communities around the world that are poor, who depend on local food and depend on local water.
Kadang-kadang saya tinggal bayar san mal ora loate lil mo tamal tayo toy Again, we got a blue waiki, man, we can blue at ma get a bit of get a blue love. I love it to get Tarakatram, to get Mabu, to get Clartila, I will do it. I get the Morogal, Malube, Katabri, I get Ran Narvi Target, and the Nasol was a cell Tara Atermalega, and to get other Kiribas and Namakiri, moving to get the other to be. Pagpagi told Maran Emal was never get Rosina Trao to bring in case and Emal Namo.
So there are photos of beach erosion, and I think a lot of you may have seen this in your communities. This will expect to decrease the fishing yield, perhaps even tourism. I know that Palau is very dependent on a successful tourism industry. And if that were to diminish or decrease, there could be some implications for health in Palau. And then again, we've talked about the inundation and the storm surge. These are just some photos.
Setora omenda do ding was abda le kesa le kama na mobe e ke lu tra arwa aral mun na ka ser mure amar ser
we have the working group at IPCC, excuse me again, actually says that the problem with freshwater resources being reduced, that they expect that water will become insufficient, and this is worldwide, insufficient to meet demand during low rainfall periods by 2050. And in fact, I spoke incorrectly. Here they are talking about small island developing states specifically. But I want to make sure to let you know, now we're going to talk a little bit about vulnerability, but we're also going to talk a little bit about the hope and the things that we can do to face all of these events that I just described. And these are really the concepts that we want to discuss with you more this week as we talk together. So what is human vulnerability? Vulnerability is simply the possibility of physical or emotional injury.
Climate change and other
So when we look at factors of human vulnerability, we want to look at these three pieces that make up the entire picture of how vulnerable a person or a community is. So the first one is whether or not a person is exposed to a disaster. If a person lives in an area where there is frequent flooding, that person is exposed. If that person leaves that area and the flood happens, they are not exposed. We also want to look at their susceptibility to harm, which means how likely is that person to receive harm from the hazard. So if this person is a 25-year-old healthy male, that person may not survive, have the same consequences as a very old person, a very young person, or someone who already has some sort of illness or some reason that they would be more susceptible. And then the last factor we put in is what we call resilience. And this is an individual or a community's ability to recover or cope with some sort of hazard or harm.
Kada makan algoritma awalnya typhoon, malu mengerakter, kita bagi serawliu, dikit mau kain se, dikit mau popular.
I just wanted to say one other thing about this. Resilience really is based on, in the community, or even an individual's resilience is based on a very strong community sense, so a strong network. Where can you receive help? How do you know how to help other people? Who are the people who support you and take care of you? The people who take care of you after a disaster are your neighbors and your family, the people right next door. So it's very clear that in a community like Palau and many of the other Pacific islands, this is a strength. And this is part of what we want to capture here this week, is this particular resilient community that exists in Palau.
Sige to na resilience sa bulbula sa sel to na kilo osi mato na buhay la tamal na tarigi de kita magi sel to
disasters worldwide. Studies have shown that 95% of the deaths following a natural disaster occur among 66% of the poorest countries.
Tulo sa sige to na mamtetamal Motim email basen traigel aradan mat motim email basen modu traigel al sel ogolum elon bil basen traigel mabul bulu al sel traigel mabul bulu 95% motim etu basen traigel mat amad traigel bulu.
And this can be due to many factors. It may be due to a lot of areas where people live close to the shore. They may live in homes that are not able to withstand a big storm. They may have pre-existing medical conditions that make them more susceptible. And again, many poor countries after disasters simply don't have the same resources as the more developed countries to provide care and the same speed or level that they do in some of the developed countries.
Malube a heta tira de alsalungin malboringa gigi del tabre del mat malube meringer tira le boringa gigi del tan makluk talaman en sabel lurin en di tira mobsisi a obrior ma patingira mobsisi.
This picture I think is either in India or Pakistan, I'm not sure. I believe this is American Samoa here.
Tira sa singra na Pakistan ese American Samoa se tsunami sen American Samoa.
So vulnerability can be exacerbated by many other things or many other aspects that a community may be experiencing already, including poverty, unequal access to resources, the pre-existing shortage of food. Perhaps not as much as a problem here in a place with the abundance of Palau, but this is particularly true in many nations in Africa where the people are struggling already to have enough food. Globalization and then existing burden of disease.
dia ka udon malu dia ka klau dengan ergi dan bru lagi toy kira dan bru dia kalau toy rakal le kahal stop dia le tak santai desa ada belam betul mana madria kalau toy rabes lunat dan maran mei elol sisa kerja dah bebila toy ada hal san ergi madria kalau legal sana dan already ngari.
So sustainable development and climate change are linked, but it's kind of a two-way relationship. Sustainable development can enhance resilience in a community, but on the other hand, climate change can thwart can impede, there you go. Climate change could actually impede or stop some of the ability to sustainable development in the community. So we have to be able to have a balance of both of these.
Mental tora sustainable development asal damangangi ya berbuat dikit dan musbet dan morulia kaisan kita dikit dan musisiil ada dikit dan moruta kalau dikit hospital kita maskulin bagian roboy ya dikit dan tora climate change dikit dan moruta ya asal most of us dikit dan tonta selesai soal ini.
And what I mean by this is that in a community maybe building and developing a good public health system and a good medical system, and then an enormous typhoon hits, and that system, if the infrastructure is destroyed and some of the people are killed or displaced, that public health system or medical system may be set back 10 or 20 years, and then they start over, and another big event hits. And so this development always starts from here and only reaches a certain level. So it's something that's a cycle.
Kami itu tora health ya smodil quantum limit again di mamatak lagi. Mona to memboringi ora desi. Ya se kita klolial komunal mel di hospital asul para untuk tamar nur sama. Ya kami ada belum komunal. Se pot. Ya normal itu asal mona to mengaria typhoon dan bengala kerabek drag. Lorang talagang to di hospital para untuk mau untuk beringi kumpul mel to beli ranesil. Ya kerdi wai se kita di to ini di asal terus.
So we can do many things in the world to at least try to lessen the climate change impact that's happening. This is a long, slow process, but we can make changes in the way that we use fuel. We can build buildings better and stronger. We can change the way that we do our agriculture and the way we use our land to manage these impacts from climate change, and we can do some recycling and measures to lessen the greenhouse gases that we're putting into the air together globally.
Alternative tora energy luasnya solar energy beli pelabot sebagai low speed lalu asal mengata berbala rumah. Ya orang rumah kalian berusaha untuk muter momes lagi lah temen. Ya pada momes luasnya orang ya uspen malah berselu lungi berbetelen malah atau orang mengklo lah lagi lungi untuk hasil. Badirek liga tora na kombirgit akhirnya terjadi momes luasnya. Lalu kita tetap satu moy tarwa plastik, maksud mera environment, tapi bodos bawa ber lagi body push tu environment.
This is a study that was done here looking at certain species of taro that are salt tolerant. I'm not sure exactly where it was. It's in the Pacific.
Tidak babien, mereka ni ada mereka sasnya tu ada ya. Dengan dia hidup tadi nafas. Maria ada hasil luas mengarah bos dan malam Michael buhau dan sebelum malam mereka tiga error mesin. Ese vale FS, betul subir FS.
Very likely an FSM. Yeah. So what this is this type of change in the way that taro is grown is one of the measures by which we can adapt to our changing environment. And there are some other measures that we can do as well, which is plan the way that we use our land, change some of our lifestyle choices, and maybe diversify the crops that we grow and eat in order to make some adaptation to this, to the climate change. But the one that, again, that we can do here in public health, most specifically, again, comes to reducing the vulnerability of our people.
Again, towards the book rule, get take it toward climate change, when you tell Mother Yol to Palau and me. As a bed and no message about brothers and Marabodo spare at the bed and Mercer Gil Tretere. Marado rule of Bill Matsum, Royal Typhoon and May, and the rule Momsisi. There was no message of Sebodolan, I get the Loman Tamala and the Collier, but we were teamed. Maltam Kiret and Moblano, my son, Tora Bid, the other Sahara Napal and Torian Napal. Ya me viene aquí el teléfono aquí de no change, ¿verdad? Aquí hay que ir de no es no sé, tiene mucho gente. Pero una va a hacer la bread, el motor va a tener que añadir limón de no monocropping, desde el tamaño de la multitud. Y aquí todo era seguido de tamaño, aquí tamaño global.
So we want to change the approach that we've taken to disasters. This is happening really internationally in the people who work in disaster response. And well, we want to move from preparedness and response really to risk reduction. And if you look at this photo, you'll see that response treats the symptoms. It takes care of the consequences of a disaster. But risk reduction aims to treat the causes of the problem.
Mga saying blue atam na change na mga dia di sel katong oklam yin mo di sel typhoon ng korokoro mo member sel drone la typhoon ang ay get to sel the remove malboria typhoon and dia atam san poklo mataman mo nga kita ngal la dia to ngi lang ngal mosmera sa ser kad map sa yo bori sel bori sel la katol sel.
So what we're talking about here is we've been doing this in health. You'll recognize that this is, for health and giving some immunization to a baby. But we want to be able to do this in public health as well and try to take this approach of treating the causes of the problems rather than only the consequences. We will never completely get away from this. This is critical, that we know how to respond to disasters and help people after an event happens. But we're trying to still move a little bit more towards focusing on this side.
Mga sa tegida mutatang doron ina health na man na tingi yobo. Kadang dia masih dasar dari limiter saya dengan yang ada buku kadang dia alway yobo ni mosmer yang kira dia kompani. And dia kadang memelaskan lo mesel was kadang makanang eruli kidel memusisi avengin matruan kita memusisi betul luar memusisi malbornya kita telaman lebih.
So when he responded to the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004. He was in a helicopter coming down to do an assessment and see what the people needed, and he was coming down to ask them some questions. But they thought that it was that they were bringing food and water. But one interesting point in this photograph, and Mark said he saw this over and over, that the people who were coming to get the food that they expected. If you look at these photos, these are healthy young men who are here. So where is everyone else? They're not here trying to greet this helicopter as it lands. And while many of these young men, once they did get food, did bring this food home to their families, we can't be entirely sure that that was always the case.
Maltaptir kami mukha yang Michael Allen domestic tigay kita dari marsu dan tolong dengan apply. Hindi hal sebenarnya malbas yang berat lawasnya.
So, how do we actually reduce our vulnerability? And as I said before, we do this locally. Normally, the national government isn't totally responsible for this, although they can help, but it's the local communities who need to be able to take care of this. So, community public health can play a very active role in this, and in fact, your public health in Palau is doing an extremely good job and is very, very active in doing this already. But we generally look at reducing susceptibility by looking at trying to improve the health of our people. We reduce exposure by making our homes and our buildings healthier. And then we increase resilience by improving the health of the community overall.
Ya sumung sodan model ada teman engineer rural trial ada kertial belum musisi sedang ada lokasi nama masuk malam high blood mas ablo gitu toya musisi dia kena mengira terumur abli dan saat mal cement mal liga di agel meraftal karangan me dan agel orang mungkal kam baru sesuai agel terumur terkir musisi mal boring ayot mases eral mases ya orang itu nama kita ada orang lain upload bela makal tak tinggi. Misal January 1st itu luas yang dia kau bela para sa hospital, di mana dia tu kita draw mulai kita.
I'm very okay. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So thank you for your patience. We don't have a lot more left, but I feel that it's important to sort of have this discussion at the beginning of the week with you. So when we look at exposure, we have land use planning and regulations that can be made to make people less exposed, floodplain management, and then we can make plans and prepare so that if we need to, we can have a plan in advance to evacuate people from a dangerous area. We can provide care for a large number of people who need it, and we can provide proper sanitation and hygiene. All of these are by way of lessening the exposure. And again, this work is being done currently here in Palau quite well already.
Jadi lo mesel wasal makana ngeruli dengan sel model atau teman dan semua peder sel ulat teman dengan mom teman. Bela awal sel typhoon shelter yang esar ngar sel kula tahu ada asal wilu das orang malah kula tahu. Mesti kita tosan mau ngil plan masuk typhoon shelter atau boro kula tahu. Ya orang erung yang ada ruli wasal murah toy ma mau mata tobi amo Mel berasal dari 2015 kita mengenai evacuated dari May yang metemur.
Reducing susceptibility, which is also being done quite well here, through health promotion, letting people know how they can protect themselves and be healthier, and communicate with them about safety and preparedness and taking care of themselves. A lot of health messaging in Palau. Basic health care, poverty reduction. Again, poverty is really the #1 factor for increased deaths and injuries following a disaster worldwide. Community planning and then immunizations as well.
Sel taratorulin modern sabte teman lagot eke tora hen metode. Timreba sabe berat time me montero se hace tora hen. Ini memotar mal mogil tabe eke toel di molgoy. Au gerung en kira de specia tora bro. Mo sisi ya ongede tora albu. Director albu lior auto albu lior قال بالمسألة هذا اللي تعودوا ده اللي نقول أساسه اللي نقول غير السبيل ولا أي يسيجد أقلب الكل Okay, then nakasabihan di wasag bukti turmal tir etter bulu ada abul kain se kire la ro bulu ma wase okmura to boy giwala boli typhoon ya ada giwala para bolu se ya oge de tora yo ba kim de no se kimura school e ngane be bir mi parents hala ti make him chera ni kim da boge no se se ngara de kim chera ti la mari ki tara le.
And let me just tell one kind of a short story about this, though, that was kind of interesting. That happened again in during the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004. There was an area, a small island, that was hit by this tsunami, as well as this large area all through Indonesia. And on this island, they had a few little songs that had been taught to children for many, many years. Generations. Nobody knew where it came from, but they've been singing this song for years. And in the song, they said, "When the earth shakes, run to the hills." And when the tsunami happened, everybody in that community ran to the hills, and that island had 0 deaths following the tsunami.
Masa saya kita lagi dari sini dari Indonesia, yang baru terkenal arah sekolah hari terklir wasi selebol logotik la bulat untuk ya ya tahu orang moroid tidak beruntung merada pemain beruntung merada di tay seral boli segitu desi lo mesrada meranmo eteriru temara adi tay mentim la kai bol ada tiga itu ke segi kare belum mat di yor tiada di tikara rasul dan kita pengira betul.
So this is a great example of how we in the community can increase our own resilience, lessen your exposure, just by simple community knowledge that is shared with all the children and everyone. So it's a wonderful story, and I just wanted to share that with you.
Seguida tele na ta kain se was the mora ne ruli mo alo lomos mo kapala ito mo iglesia di maybe ang area beberata ng buklongot ang kapala at tele na kada bisul mo dito.
So this is what we call the 6 R's of resilience. So these are the pieces that we put together: readiness, robustness, redundancy, resourcefulness, which is highlighted because it's so critical, rapid response and recovery. All of these together build a stronger and more resilient community.
Talking about the 6 R, el que la resilience start R. Di belang ada hasil betul R. Aku tahu asal kita mau ready, kita mau ketemu. Yang ngerun masih jadi buat ketemu kalau orang mau terjebak matun. Dia ada ngariat checking account, telepon mereka terjebak savings, orang yang orang mau robust. Yang ngerun, elang ada email hotel mana berlai. Orang yang email mana terlalu tuan, email mana rumah dari resell mate, elang apa terlihat masih. Yang ngerun. Lang tim momes lo sa pamagarang muspai ke robul ngara mari ro matsum mandi ke odi mem atu abran me ngana plan okay wase mo makligi te gil tora patel por man bit mo sa okay ya okay lo wase sel ni kal me tap elatin to offer blue what the basen recovery.
And again, this is a little cartoon that we like here, this very popular Dilbert cartoon. It says, our disaster recovery plan goes something like this. And there's a man yelling, "Help, help!"
Secondary, muasir tinggal planner mam, kita tu ramai lah atur malah tinggal lagi. Kalau Maria desi tim mengisi motor pula ada orang pula ada orang asti mana WhatsApp mana lagi tangan semua orang.
So the resilience is the ability to cope with and recover from disasters, and behaviors that increase resilience are being prepared, your capability of preparing before an event, your ability to respond, how well does the community respond, and then to recover. And these are composed of ability to adapt, respond, and recover.
تأييد الطوارئ أو رسالين بالون قدرولين المواضيع تمتد تمال الطوارئ عدد المقل الطوارئ عدد سبعين المريض isin mo.
This, I believe, is the very last slide, but this is just this was just a demonstration of the differences with these three pieces of exposure, susceptibility, and resilience. So when we looked at epidemics, reducing exposure, and how is that done? Well, for an illness, reducing exposure can be done by quarantine, by separating people, making sure that they don't come in contact with one another.
So no me sa ka gida le tora po yurak na gel ko kora tanamal rablu ngal pedro sisiwa tele la donda sungire la agote sel l'exposure avase asu mangari adal TV e kada mara mu moro idra baby ra adam tikel te TV te abot TV kodori.
But when we look at exposure to something like a typhoon or flood, it means that evacuation is a way to make sure that people are not exposed, move them away from the hazard.
Ela sel do mesra buka tora typhoon ya le typhoon la Palau e kada mo titikal adal mora bugongo mora sisi lai alu mora kerta to.
Susceptibility for infectious diseases can be reduced by vaccines.
Se to para po yurak te ngel sumsadan adala kol osase e kada msase yo mo mende kol osase.
But susceptibility to floods and typhoons, we discussed were largely the ability to have stronger buildings, stronger homes, protective gear, and so on and so forth.
Selvoya liobora typhoon am sisi lai alu ben sepeda moringe te amata.
But the last point we really want to make with this slide is that increased resilience for epidemics and increased resilience for any other hazard are really the same factors. It's planning and community and knowledge and healthy people. All of these pieces will be the same whether you're trying to increase resilience for one of these events or another.
Diesel marulin mo de adam metataman al boy rak malubel typhoon sel helder gaur abekel sils del sisi abnge men se melo yur malubel gamisen ya seri malubel ngariate adam namra de amare.
So with that, I want to thank you again for your patience, and just want to say that we in this room as public health and as community leaders and as parents and grandparents are the people who can really work in our communities to increase this resilience in Palau. So thank you very much for your time.
Teman besar kita nanti kita saya dari kita dulu itu model ada teman.